Grandfather taught me that when you are sick, you should take a bowl of water and you should read to it. If you know the Quran, read the Quran. But it doesn't really matter what you read, so long as it's something that holds real meaning for you. Then you take the bowl of water and you wash yourself with it, and it will make you well. I have only the dimmest understanding of what this all means, but I now appreciate what my grandfather was trying to teach me. In that moment, I felt a bond form between the two of us, more powerful than our differing cultures, one that left equal room for old wisdom and new science. body be blessed. May you find that holiness is seeing, tasting, touching, and sensing. May your senses gather you and bring you home. May you find that your senses are a sacred threshold. May you find peace and joyfulness in the mystery and power in your presence here. May the Eros of the earth bless you. Your body be blessed. May you find that holiness is hearing, tasting, touching, seeing, and sensing.
We're sitting in front of the Upper Iowa River on a beautiful fall morning, and when I come here at times, pretty much at any time, it's a really big reminder of how blessed I feel to live in a part of the world that is so rich in water resources. But the things that make me feel that way, that make me appreciate, are the different senses that you get when you are next to a body of water, and I don't think that's an accident. So I'm a biology professor as well, and biology textbooks call water the molecule of life. So it gets this very special designation, and it's absolutely essential for life, and it's non-negotiable. So part of that molecule of life designation is due to lots of things being able to dissolve in water inside our cells, and allowing all of the reactions that take place inside cells that give life. Another major life-giving force of water is that it literally holds our cell membranes together. So really fundamental biological processes are completely driven by happening in a water environment. As humans, we have this innate attraction to water, and I don't think that's an accident, given how essential it is for our lives and lives of all organisms. As we're sitting here in front of the Upper Iowa, right in Decorah, I think about the visual attraction to bodies of water, and that could mean the Upper Iowa River, and it could mean a really small stream, or Dunning Spring, or it could mean the ocean, or the Mississippi River, but we are really attracted visually to water. And we're also really attracted by what we hear. So you can hear the stream trickling, the Upper Iowa River here trickling through, and that's a very peaceful sound that's repeated in many different ways. But it's pleasurable to listen to that. We also have this attraction to feeling water. So just looking at the stream here, I'm attracted to going and getting in it. And if my kids were here, they would be in it. But we like to splash ourselves and recreate and feel the water. We love to float in water. And you can imagine what a relaxation sense that gives a human. We also love the taste and the smell of water. So the feel and the taste as a drink a big glass of water when you're incredibly refreshing. So all of our senses communicate that to us, how essential it is. How would my life be different living here in Decorah, Iowa, if the Upper Iowa River did not run through? I'm not sure Decorah would be here. Many populations of humans settle intentionally near bodies of water. And so for me, in addition to my work with the watershed, it's really created what I would call a very deep affection for this resource. And I think it's innate. I think I'm just maybe paying more attention to it at this moment in time, but I think all humans have this innate affection. But I'm hoping that our work in the watershed, one of the goals is just to increase that level of affection, increase that love for this resource, so that, because we'll take care of what we love. So what is it that makes water such a special molecule? On a surface level, it looks pretty simple. It's an oxygen atom connected to 2 hydrogen atoms. But if we zoom in on this bond, what it looks like is that there are 2 electrons that are shared between hydrogen and oxygen to make that bond. Electrons are tiny negatively charged particles. But here's the catch. Oxygen has a much stronger pull for those electrons. And so in reality, it doesn't look like that. Oxygen pulls those electrons towards it. They spend more time around that atom. What this means is the oxygen atom is going to have a partial negative charge. What it leaves behind then at the hydrogen atoms, in the absence of those electrons, are partial positive charges. So the water molecule has an imbalance of charge. But now we want to consider that there's not just one molecule. There are lots of water molecules that look like this. And so if this is the next one, we can draw it like this, where the positive charge of the hydrogen is attracted to the negative charge of the oxygen. And down here, similar, this partial negative charge of the oxygen has an attraction to this positive charge of this molecule. So it turns out that each water molecule can bind 4 other water molecules in this way. And collectively then, you can see that these water molecules are very sticky for each other. They like interacting with each other. And you can see this physically. This is the reason that water molecules tend to clump together in drops when they're pulled by gravity or sitting on a surface, rather than spreading out in a thin film. This stickiness of water molecules for themselves is also extended to many, many other types of substances that have some sort of charge. And so you can dissolve lots and lots of molecules, many critical for biology, in water. However, just as critical is that not everything dissolves well in water. In fact, if you're a molecule that's relatively uncharged and you come up next to water molecules, you're going to be very uncomfortable. And you're going to prefer to interact with yourself, all uncharged, rather than interact with charges. A good example of this that many people are familiar with is oil. So if you take water, as I've done here, and I've colored it blue, and add it to a flask, and then pour corn oil on top of it, and mix it, well, it doesn't mix very well. And this is because those positive and negative charges are dominating in the lower part, and oil, relatively uncharged, is preferring to be by itself, with itself, in the upper layer. The reason that this becomes so important for biology is that our cell membranes are made up of oil-like molecules. They don't interact well with water. And this can be observed readily if one looks at microscopic single-celled aquatic organisms. One can see that those membranes are fluid. The inside of those organisms is primarily water. They're living in a water environment on the outside, and it's those forces of water and the uncharged molecules wanting to be just with each other that literally is holding that membrane together. The fragility of this situation can be observed as well. If those organisms are allowed to dry out, the membranes fall apart. Another feature of water that's critical for life is that it's 92% of the blood. And so it not only dissolves all of these nutrients, But the stickiness of water allows them to be transported all through the body, literally giving life to and connecting all of the cells. Where would we be without water? Humans, animals, and plants, we wouldn't have a way to transport our nutrients. Our cell membranes would fall apart. The proteins on the insides of our cells, that are the little machines that are doing all of our jobs for our cells, they would fall apart too, because their structure is dependent upon water forces. And even the biochemical reactions that are capturing energy for us and building our parts, they wouldn't happen because water is a key part of those reactions. So the bottom line is that water is what is making life possible. Water is life. And there is no molecule, either that exists on Earth or that can be imagined, that can substitute for that. we're now going to move from a micro to a macro scale. First, a watershed is any piece of land that drains to a common point, and so that could be part of your yard, it could be part of a farm, it could be 20,000 acres, as is the case for dry run. All it means is that they drain to a common point. Our farm is at the top of the Dry Run Creek watershed, where streams are just beginning to flow. And I think about what happens when rain falls on our farm. Some of that rain goes into the soil and will eventually become groundwater. Most of it falls on our land and flows over it. And because I've been out working in this watershed for a few years, in the rain, going up and down ditches, going under bridges, sampling water, I know exactly where the drops of water from our farm are going to go. First, they're going to go down into this little valley and collect into a temporary stream until that stream reaches one of the very first tributaries of Dry Run Creek. And at that point, the water from our farm is going to join water from two of our neighbors' farms. And in and of ourselves, we're going to have a little watershed. From there, water from our farms is going to go under the very first bridge. After that, many more farms' drainage is going to join it, and it's going to go under a second bridge. And after that, a pretty equivalent tributary coming from the southwest portion of these 20,000 acres is going to join up together. And when I think about this and view it aerially, it starts to make me think about it as a capillary blood vessel system, where these capillaries, smaller capillaries, are joining together to form larger vessels and ever larger vessels. And this fluid that's running in them is what's giving life to the tissues of the earth. And so when these join together ultimately into the large vessel in this 20,000 acres, it forms the formal Dry Run Creek. And this creek is visible from Highway 9. It runs parallel to Highway 9 towards the city of Decorah. But before it gets there, it goes through what's called the Cut. And this is a man-made cement structure that was built in the 1940s to divert Dry Run Creek around the city of Decorah instead of through it, because it was causing a lot of flooding issues. And whenever I drive over Highway 52, I intentionally look down into the Cut, especially in the summer, because there are almost always children playing. And I think about those children playing in water that comes off of my farm. Once that water gets through the Cut and right through the Decorah campground, it'll enter into the Upper Iowa River. From there, it goes through the city of Decorah, right under the College Drive Bridge, and right past the Decorah City Wells, interacting with anything and everything that makes contact with that water. From there, water from my farm is going to travel another 51 miles and be joined by lots and lots of other water draining from areas in Winneshiek and Alameda counties until it reaches New Albin, where the Upper Iowa meets the Mississippi and the water from my farm goes in. Water from my farm will then be joined by lots and lots of water coming from 31 different states and even part of Canada, going down the Mississippi, interacting with people and animals and plants and boats and barges. And it also is going to become drinking water for about 18 million people. After about 2.5 months, the drops of water that I saw flowing over my land are going to meet the Gulf of Mexico and empty into the sea. Knowing this and knowing what happens at the molecular level, when I touch the water flowing off my farm now, it's a really powerful experience, because I am thinking about all of those molecular connections between those molecules that are all sticking and holding on to each other. all the way down. And it makes me realize that I'm touching the ocean.
We are water creatures. I'm 70% water, and the water I get all comes from the river basin. It all comes out of the same pool of water that feeds the upper Iowa and feeds local springs. And so whatever's in that water is in me.
Our contaminations come from, we divided it into two different parts, point and non-point source pollution. Point source pollution is a pipe coming from a factory, if you will, or a channel dug to transport wastewater directly into a river or stream.
When it rains and it touches those impervious surfaces, it runs into our stormwater collection system, and it's not treated. Essentially, it's just going to run the shortest path between here and the river. So when it runs off a parking lot and goes into a storm grate, there's all kinds of contaminants that it picks up along the way, whether just sand and salt sediments from the winter or grease and oil from cars in that parking lot, which may have heavy metals in them. It runs the full spectrum of contamination.
The toughest one, and the one we have to deal with most in Iowa, is what we call the non-point source pollution. And this is the pollution that occurs when that raindrop hits the land in Iowa, primarily. And Iowa in particular, probably more than just about any other state, is faced with a real big task of dealing with non-point source pollution. We're probably the most developed state in the country. No, you don't picture us that way, do you? But almost all of our land is used in one way or another, mostly in agriculture. Most of it is in row crops, 26 million acres, about 5 million acres in forest, although most of the forest has been used over the years and continues to be for pasture and so on. So we very intensively use our land. I don't think there's another state in the country that uses more of its land in economic activity than we do.
In recent years with ethanol, and particularly ethanol, the corn production has just gone way, way up. And it's really taken a lot of land out of CRP, which was so critical for habitat for pheasants and other wildlife, as well as for other watersheds and keeping these streams in the condition they're in.
So every year, the Department of Natural Resources assesses, monitors the quality of a whole set of bodies of water in the state of Iowa. And from that data, so each year, it ends up being very close to about 75% of the water bodies in Iowa that are impaired for at least one of their designated uses. And I'll start with the one that is affecting the watershed that I work on, the Dry Run Creek watershed, and that's bacteria. So specifically levels of E. coli indicating fecal matter, so mammalian poop in the river. And what that does is it causes a human health hazard. So if E. coli is present, it means that there might be other microbes or viruses, bacteria that are present that could cause human disease. Right here in this location, when it's not raining, we get about 2,000 E. coli cells in about a half a cup of water. That's about 10 times higher than what the state standard is. But when it's raining, it can escalate much higher than that. Another really big one is actually soil itself. This is probably the pollutant that's the most obvious to us, and you see it when we're experiencing rains, especially heavy rains. So the water it gets cloudy and more cloudy, and sometimes gets to look like chocolate milk level of cloudiness when we're experiencing flooding and really heavy rains.
With water, and that's rain, John is very concerned about seeing dirt move.
When I was growing up, it was my job to check the rain gauge after a rain. And my folks had it a long ways from the house for whatever reason. But I can remember one time of seeing 4 inches in the gauge in the morning after an overnight rain. Otherwise it was, just like a quarter, half, maybe inch and a half or 2 at the most. But one time seeing 4 inches. And now
4
you can have
inches
4 or
is
6.
very regular.
And it's all over the country it's that way.
I know that because I've been measuring in Dry Run Creek, I know that it is also a contributor of that sediment and soil, and it's not unique for that or bacteria. Many sub-watersheds of the upper Iowa are contributing the same pollutants.
So Northeast Iowa is in the driftless region, and part of our driftless region is characterized by karst topography. Karst landscape forms by the dissolving of soluble rock by flowing water.
A lot of it comes through sinkholes on the surface because we are in an area that has karst topography. So you can basically compare the bedrock to Swiss cheese. It's full of holes.
And so what that means for potential contamination issues is that if your surface water is contaminated with bacteria and nitrates, that there are quicker routes and perhaps direct linkages between surface water and groundwater, and then potentially connections into wells. And so this is especially an issue for shallow wells. It's also not restricted to rural areas. And so if we look at the city of Decorah wells, city of Decorah has historically and still has excellent drinking water, but nitrates are a pretty significant concern. So those 6 active wells lie adjacent to the Upper Iowa River, just in front and behind the College Drive Bridge. And they are rated as highly susceptible to surface and subsurface contamination. And in fact, at least two, and maybe 3 of those wells are showing fluctuations in nitrate levels that correspond to the amount of discharge or the amount of water flowing by in the Upper Iowa River. For animals and humans, if we consume too much nitrate, it's converted to other forms that then interfere with our ability to transport oxygen in our blood, so pretty serious. And it's the segment of our population that's most susceptible are infants, so it causes a disorder called blue baby syndrome. The bottom line here is that we live in a very fragile environment with respect to water quality because of all these passageways between our surface water, much of which is contaminated, and our groundwater. One that I'll talk about, which is also a big one for Iowa, are nutrients. And when you hear the term nutrient, you think positive in general, because that's how we feed our bodies, is with nutrients, and we grow. But nutrients in the wrong place can do great damage. And so the nutrients that I'm talking about specifically are nitrogen and phosphorus. And these are very common and necessary farm fertilizers. And so you have these 2 fertilizer components that end up being flushed into bodies of water, streams, and rivers.
There's also problems in our urban or community centers because concentration-wise on a lawn, if they actually analyzed the nutrient level they're putting on, it's very, very high. And that people have been, I think, indoctrinated on what the front yard should look like.
Iowa is actually a major contributor of this sort of pollution, disproportionately so. For the nitrogen contribution, Iowa is in the top 3, and for phosphorus, Iowa's in the top 7. When it has these nutrients in it, they provide what they normally do to living organisms, a nutrient source, but in the wrong place, it's a real tragedy. And so you can have catastrophic effects, and that is what is happening in the Gulf of Mexico. So the Gulf of Mexico normally doesn't have high levels of nitrogen or phosphorus, and because of that, the microbes in the ocean there they're growing, and they can subsist to some extent, the algae and the microbes, but they're not taking over. But when you provide all that fertilizer to them, the algae grow into these huge blooms, and then they die and provide the food for the bacteria to grow, and they just explode in population. And while they are doing that, they are using all available oxygen, and the oxygen in the Gulf of Mexico disappears. So any other life forms that are dependent on oxygen either have to move or they die. And this is now occurring, and it's seasonal, so it expands every spring, summer into an area that's in the range of 5,000 to 7,000 square miles.
it's vastly larger than the BP oil spill, and yet it happens every single year. And we know it's coming from the Corn Belt.
In all that area, there's not a single living organism that you can see. So it's an ecological disaster. So where do we go from here? We have to start with the soil, for it is from the soil, both its surfaces and its depths, that water comes.
It's hard to convince people to try something totally new on a large scale. It's hard to get a 60-year-old landowner who farms 5,000 acres in western Iowa to say, would you be interested in trying 1,000 acres of cover crops? Because that's something totally new and not without an expense.
You know, God's plan is to have something always on that soil.
With the organics, I grow my nitrogen.
We've got some farms that have been no-till for 15 years. And we can get a 2-inch rain and not a drop of water runs off.
Why can't we ask farmers to grow conservation as well? Why can't we ask farmers to produce bluebirds? Farmers who have restored wetlands, to a person will say, it's the most interesting part of my farm. They've got frogs croaking in the spring and they've got birds out there. And I think as a nation we ought to pay farmers to do it.
Now I see farming as a thing that really, my role is to help connect people to the earth, to what's going on.
That excites us to have them interested in I think we need more young people in agriculture. Might not be, maybe they won't grow corn and soybeans, but that's okay.
I want to be accountable for my little piece of land in Iowa. And if there's something wrong, I want to fix it.
Well, as an Iowan, I have this vision of us creating buffers that are green around all the water courses in the state.
Now I think, I would just be more concerned about plowing it all up again. I just wouldn't like to see that done. I like it. I like the land.
Water, just as you said, it's limited. It's like if you don't really take good care of it, a time will come you might not have it.
From traditional Cherokee people who live in the southern Appalachian Mountains. It was a living thing, not just a fluid part of the geology, but it was a living thing, and it had the power of healing.
I just hope that each person can find a way to remember the indebtedness that we have, the gift that it is just to be alive, and to wake up to the personal responsibility that we each have, and the joy of that responsibility as well.
All of the really beautiful things that people do, all of the things that make other humans say, I'm glad to be alive right now, are things that people do together.
We all have a decision to make. What is it worth? What is the molecule of life worth?